Okay, for people who are joining this live stream, we are talking about code assistance, helping people to write correct code more easily. So we are looking, I think, at some UX for code assistance. Is that right?
Yeah, so at first, the first item is going to be kind of quick, I think. Going over.
Oh, we're going to talk about the code formatter. That's really exciting. Okay.
That's why I put that second.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But yeah, no, just first things first.
Okay. Should we see your screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, go for it.
So we want to add a menu item.
By the way, do we have somebody from design here?
Jeremy's here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great.
So we're wanting to add a menu item to the evaluation menu. I'm thinking underneath here, right where this delimiter is, to say analyze notebook. That will do this functionality. So look over in the code assistance demo notebook, and then when I evaluate this, you see that all of the little problem balloons pop up, independent of doing any shift enter evaluations.
That's cool.
So just adding this, obviously first probably to the prototype build, and let people discover it and figure out like what's going on. But
well, I mean, all this menu is ridiculously complicated. And
yeah.
I think we should put a bunch of submenus in here. I mean, for example, I think all the parallel kernel stuff and so on. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of submenus. Clearly the debugger, nobody uses that at this point. I don't even know if it still works, does it?
It still works. I get bugs on it.
Okay, well, that's a good sign that people are using it.
I wouldn't assume that nobody's using it. I would say that some of that usage is a bit frustrated, but people are still trying.
Right. Well, hopefully this whole approach will be a better path forward. But yeah, okay. Look, this menu needs to be cleaned up. But putting analyze notebook. Well, how about analyze code in notebook?
You mean just for the tech? Yeah, I mean, sure, that'd be fine. It was just a question of analyzing the entire notebook, or do we want to analyze whatever selected cells that you have, and just in the name of, brevity and just having one menu item, doing the entire notebook makes the most sense. Analyze code in notebook, sure.
Yeah, analyze code in notebook. I think otherwise it's obscure what this actually means. I'm not completely certain this is the right menu for it.
You mean the entire category, the evaluation menu?
Yeah, look at the edit menu.
I mean, yes, you're right, because even having it in the evaluation menu does still even connote evaluation is happening when this is supposed to be independent.
Why don't you put something in here saying check code?
But it's not an editing operation.
Well, no, it's check spelling.
Well, check spelling is pretty close.
This is check code.
Okay.
Which is what I think it should be called, check code.
If we're thinking about generally organizing the whole menu structure, there is a cell category here. Have people ever wanted a notebook menu category?
Yes, there used to be one. In version 1, I think there was a notebook top-level category.
Yeah.
It has to be version 1 because I've never seen it, and I've been working since version 2.1. So
unless I'm crazy, we could go look at a version 1 screenshot. I'm pretty sure there was a notebook menu.
Someone else will have to share their screen for that.
Yeah. I don't think we can share. I don't think Zoom works on a Mac, SE30 or something. So,
but if we think about maybe a notebook top-level menu category, and then maybe things follow from that.
No,
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about having it be in the cell menu?
I don't think it makes any sense.
Okay, where do you think it should go?
Well, I mean, I had started with the evaluation menu because it's very much
we can put it there. I
connected
mean,
to evaluation.
This is still an early thing, right? So I think Sound on our live stream is suggesting analyze. Well, what I would do is say analyze code in or analyze code in selection would be something in the right click menu. Right?
Yeah, separately from this.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. All right. In the evaluation notebook, let's see it again, please.
Just the menu here.
Yeah. See, these are so. I would put it, if you're going to put it somewhere here, if there was any other way to pull up the debugger, I would take it out of this menu and use that space for this functionality.
Yeah.
Well, the one weird thing about the organization here is it is a bit strange that there's, debugger by itself and then debugger controls. I mean, we could move everything into a submenu.
Sure.
And that would not be unsensible, in my opinion.
Fine. But then still, if we say analyze code and then it says debugger, it gives the debugger more importance. We really want to bury the debugger. I'll tell you what. How about we put under find currently evaluating cell, it's kind of like an aborty thing, the debugger. We could put the debugger underneath there, kind of hide it in that group, and say debugger ... in there, and then put the menu items associated with this code analysis up in that slot where we've got the debugger right now.
It won't be ...
You think it's just one menu item?
The triangle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you say debugger ... implies that it invokes an interface.
Yeah. No, okay, fine. I mean, I meant debugger, arrow, submenu.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay, fine. Let's put it there. It's not a great place for it because it's sandwiched in between a bunch of things that are really about evaluation. Humph.
So
Brian on our live stream is suggesting splitting some of the items in evaluation into tools. Tools would be an interesting menu to have. I agree, that would be an interesting menu.
So we definitely don't want a notebook top level.
We're not going to have a notebook top level menu thing.
No. That's a bad idea.
But why? Okay.
Because we've already got file.
Exactly.
Should analyze
and you should know that Stephen and I come to blows on user interface stuff all the time. So when we
anytime
are 100%
we agree,
in agreement,
it's highly significant.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's look at the file menu for a second. Is this 12.1? Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An interesting possibility would be an analyze thing here, or analyze file or something, or just analyze.
Yeah.
Although it operates on a whole notebook, in a fundamental sense, it's not a file level operation.
It won't be in the future. I agree with that.
Yeah. For example, if you save, close, and reopen the notebook, you won't see these annotations. At least not as presently designed, which I think is the right thing.
I think it's the right thing. All right, let's put it for now in the evaluation menu. So go back to the evaluation menu. Let's move debugger underneath those find currently evaluating cell, and let's put it in its very own section, analyze code in notebook. And hopefully that will give it, such bright lights that people will pay attention to it.
And basically, you mean putting it
in that section? Yeah. Yes.
Of this group? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. For now, I think it may end up being more than one menu item
Actually,
anyway.
I would suggest that rather than putting it there, I would put it above the dynamic stuff.
Fine.
Because
Fine.
it's really quite closely related to evaluation. You know,
All right, okay.
Dynamic is a form of evaluation, but a different form.
All right, fine. Then put it maybe without even a break under evaluate initialization cells and then analyze code in notebook. It's the third item in that section.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's now that we've done some throat clearing, and don't forget the right click menu, analyze code in selection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's actually look at the content, please, because that's the main event.
Yes.
Now, are we going to have a function as well?
Yeah. I mean, it necessarily has to call into the kernel regardless. So, yeah. Are you meaning to analyze?
I think it should be called notebook code analysis or something. No, that doesn't suggest. Let's see.
Well,
we have notebook open and
so there's a question here what the function does. I mean, if does the function just programmatically create what we're seeing here? That's straightforward. It's maybe not as useful. What's more useful, maybe, but something that I'm not sure if we have a pattern for, is something that can like generate a report.
Well, we do have a pattern for that. We have plenty of patterns, like the notebook templating stuff, like generate document. Generate document is a perfect example.
No, I don't think so. Sorry. When I say, I may have misspoken a bit when I said generate a report. I mean, what I meant was something which programmatically returns, what are the errors that came up and which cells were they attached to.
Sure. Well, that will be similar to the testing framework, for example.
Maybe similar to what the testing framework should be doing. I'm not sure if it's the same as what it's actually doing.
Yeah, just so people also know, there are reporting functions that already exist, but just not for notebook.
But so what I mean here, for example, is that you want to be able to, as some kind of scheduled task or something, you want to be able to run an analysis on a notebook and report that the analysis was clean, or if it wasn't clean, here are the things that came out of the analysis.
Yeah.
Right. In other words, you're like on the function repository, you might just run this on everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So listen, I think there's a language design thing, and let's get that separately. Okay. Can you make a list of all the functions, like your lint, string reports, and so on, all these other ones, and let's do a session doing language design on these. But let's not do that today.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good idea.
Let's go look at your right-hand side here and what it's actually doing, because that's a little different. That's not what is that what we agreed last time in terms of the UX?
No, hold on. This is old UX.
Okay.
Not current. It is what is currently implemented, though.
Okay, but you've got the new UX, right?
Yes. I mean, it's in, we have the meetings and we discuss the design and we're figuring out how to put the chevrons and how to put the squigglies and all of that. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have something? Do you have a design document you could just flash up of that?
Well, no, not right now, because I wasn't planning on doing this. This is just old. This is just the old.
Okay, so we were mostly just talking about where the menu item goes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, but so then your task, though, is to implement the new squigglies and chevrons and all that kind of stuff, right?
Well, some of that stuff is going to have to be in the front end.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of front end work also that
Okay, can we see the design? Do you have a design document? Is there a designer who's worked on the design? I think, was it Billy who'd worked on a design document for this?
It was him, but he's out, so I don't have access to his files. I can look. I'm not sure I'll be able to pull them up.
Fine. Let's go on to the next segment then. So I think there's nothing more to say about that. I mean, that I'm really looking forward to that UX because I think it's wonderful.
Oh yeah.
And obviously that UX will flow back into things like Yeah, by the way, Brian on our live stream is agreeing with me that the word code needs to be in the name of these things. It's not notebook analyze because there's all kinds of random stuff in a notebook. It's code analysis, notebook code analysis. Right? That's what it needs to say.
Yeah. When it's now, it makes the naming of the functions. If you want.
No, I don't know whether that's right. Let's not do the function naming now. Okay.
Yeah.
No. And it should be anyway.
Well, I mean, all permutations of.
No, don't worry about that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not relevant right now. Okay. Just bring all those to the meeting where we're going to talk about language design for these, please. Okay. Okay. Let's go back. All right. Now let's go on with the section 2, which was code formatting.
Yep. So.
Okay. Deep breath. New topic.
Yes.
Very exciting. Okay. On we go. Yes.
So yeah, we've had a few meetings, but for the benefit of everyone, watching and listening, we've been discussing code formatting, and there have been a few different approaches that I've been looking at and exploring. People even at the tech conference were asking about it, and we've been able to say we're actively working on it. And so
okay. Anyway, so the main thing you're going to show is the white space and new line changer. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Which we think is a valuable. Okay, so let's. Okay, so we talked about airiness level, the extent to which new lines just get added.
Well, not just new lines, but okay. So I want to manage expectations right here. Airiness level in its full glory is not going to be shown today because I'm still working on things, but there is a minuscule, smaller version of just showing what is possible with different levels of white space and new lines. Okay. And what I've been working on mainly is within a single line, or within a single expression, I should say, that might span lines, what you can do by adding white space in between things.
Okay, and let's see.
Not even only always adding new lines, but also sometimes removing them. So
okay.
I made up a little manipulate here. So this is the string from above. So just imagine that this is just normal code.
I understand.
And so there are these.
I mean, it's very weird code, but yeah, go ahead.
To be sure for everyone, this is demonstration code. Yes.
No, I understand, but I'd like to see it with a real piece of code because presumably your code runs on anything. This is just okay. So you're going to run it on this, and then we're going to run it on some real piece of code.
Yep. Okay. And so what you can see here is
try moving the slider. Could you try moving the slider so we can actually see what?
So it's the formatting's not on. And so just simply formatting it with the lowest setting possible, you can see, so what ends up happening is some basic things change where the line continuations disappear.
Yeah, okay, so that's our generic formatting.
And you can see...
Right, I get it, yeah, okay. That's the generic formatting, I understand. So now let's see what happens when you change that.
So then, okay, yeah, so if you go down to the middle, the first that I consider, the next change that I think is acceptable to people is adding a space when there's implicit times. And so if you see the contiguous...
Yeah, I see it, yeah. Yes,
and then the next one is below where there are cases where...
Yeah, I see it. Those are nice. Okay, continue.
And then the whole thing...
I don't think that's interesting. The whole thing where it's really airy like that, I couldn't care less about that. I would say that the thing that you're showing previously is stuff that should be default formatting. That is, if you move that back to about a third of the way across the airiness thing, the fact that 4 blanks format, could you just type in 4 blanks together? Just type in someplace. Oh yeah, so that doesn't do too bad.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there is an understanding in the front end about
So what? So why you? I mean, that's fine. And what about that?
This isn't for code that's in notebooks, though.
What are you talking about? That happens in a notebook.
Right, but what I'm talking about is this code being in a .m file that someone formats, where.
Oh, well, I mean, yes, putting in a bunch of, I mean, yes. I mean, that would be the minimal thing to do, is put in a bunch of the auto spacing rules that we already have. Why not?
Yeah.
Well, wait
Yeah,
a second. The why not is because this is supposed to be a plain text. Is it a plain text file or is it not a plain text file?
Yeah, plain text.
Okay, but
Yeah,
if it's a plain
.m,
text
.wl
file,
files.
hold on. If it's a plain text file, you get to put in 1 space or 0 spaces and not a thin space, right? So in the front end, that's undoubtedly a thin space. Right?
It's I think it's larger than a thin space, but smaller than a real space. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but Brenton, what are you doing exactly here? Because in this demo, is this plain text? Is this
Okay,
a pure string?
Don't get hung up on the, the underscore specifically.
No, I know that. I just want to know, is it plain text?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you move that airiness thing between the F bracket and G bracket, it is adding a space,
a literal
whole
space,
integer space,
a literal space.
Correct.
Okay.
ASCII 32.
Yes. Okay.
And so, yeah, a lot of this is obviated by working in the front end, obviously, but,
Well, even in the front end, we are highly interested to know about new line airiness, right? Even in the front end, it is my belief.
Well, there are cases where it's very relevant in the front end, like in code cells, for example. Code cells,
have auto spacing.
Lots of auto spacing doesn't happen in code cells.
Well, okay, but fine, but let's
Command 8.
Or, well, yeah, code.
I mean, just type the underscores.
Just copy your source into that. No, don't, well, that okay, but just copy that source into the code cell. Oh, for God's sake. Are you serious? No, that's not going to work. That's not going to work in this. Oh, what did that just do?
I'm not sure about the formatting inside of manipulate.
I see. Okay. Okay, so that's the code cell version of this. So is that got auto spacing?
And the I don't know where the it doubled the backslashes because it was inside a string. So yeah, remove 1 from the backslash.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
We did leave some auto multiplication stuff in here. Arguably, maybe we shouldn't have. I think reasonable people might disagree on that one.
No, I think look, there's nothing wrong with, so long as it's clear what's actually going to be there in the plain text file, all is fair, I think, in these code cells. And in fact, my argument is, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the fact that code cells don't do any auto formatting. But whatever. I mean, I never use them for that reason. Never use them.
Well, some people, but you have to understand. I mean, you personally have to understand that some people use them for that reason.
I know that. But okay, I want to come back to what I see as the main point of airiness, which is line breaking that applies both to auto-formatted code in the front end in an ordinary cell, in an ordinary input cell, for example, and to, what we might call integer broken, plain text code.
Well, a lot of times it will make the spaces will make less sense in an input cell. The new lines may make quite a lot of sense.
Yeah, the new lines are what we care about in an input cell. That was the whole point. And I mean, I think that in an input cell, we can imagine having, continuous variations of line spacing as well. We can consider having, in addition to a paragraph break, we can have phrases and this, that, and the other. We can have a mini paragraph break, so to speak, if you understand what I'm saying, in the code, which is a degree of freedom that we don't have. I mean, right here, we have double new lines, which is a useful degree of freedom in kind of plain text formatted code. But we may have an intermediate case in sort of auto-formatted code. I shouldn't say auto-formatted. What should I say? Notebook formatted code. Okay. I mean, this is fine as far as it goes, but okay. So what did we really want to look at here? I mean, this is fine, but the thing that I think is really interesting is the new line case, because I think that's what's going to move the needle in terms of making code readable.
Absolutely. And it's just in flux. There are issues involved with knowing, because you can't just add a new line, right?
Sure, right.
There are just lots of issues. So one, you want to reproduce any indentation that you might have from above.
Yep.
Or maybe you don't, because what you're doing is correcting the indentation that you're already, that you're working with.
Right. Or you want additional indentation if you're indenting within a subtree and so on.
Yeah. I guess I mean the indentation.
I understand. If you've got indentation n already on a line, and you decide to break that line, you probably want at least indentation n, if not indentation n plus something.
Yeah. I just mean even before considering adding new
I know
lines,
that. You might want to remove indentation because it's wrong.
Yes. Yeah. And so you don't want to do
the question is how much
time.
signaling did the fact that somebody put indentation in, you don't just want to blow away their indentation because they may have some beautiful indentation
correct, yes,
thing that is very meaningful to their code. The question is, how do you tell? So this is a heuristic we need. How do you tell that somebody just goofed the indentation?
Yes,
okay?
That is, yeah.
Okay, so let me give you some suggested heuristics. Okay, so let's think about how it got there. Okay, so if, for example, somebody started editing and they just started typing without typing any tabs, are these tabs that are indentation are we expecting, or are we expecting their space indentation?
I mean, the answer is yes to anything.
Yeah, I think it could easily be both.
I mean,
okay,
yeah.
Fine. All right, so then
it may not even be consistent in the same body of code.
Fine.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate and makes Brenton's job a heck of a lot more difficult.
Okay, so let me make a couple of suggestions about that. Do we want to actually merge? How many spaces is a tab? Is it 4?
That's not. It's anything that the user thought it was when he was writing it.
But it does something definite in the text editor. What does it do in a typical text editor?
Well,
what's a setting that you can change?
Yeah, 4 is more common than anything else. But when I say more common, I don't mean 98%. I mean maybe 55%.
Okay. All right. Okay. But so then
there's quite a bit of division on this.
Okay. So what we know at the beginning of a line is it's n tabs and m spaces. But actually, it isn't just that. It's a sequence of tabs and spaces, right?
Because the tabs might have been aligned. Yes.
Hold on. Do tabs really tab?
By the way, additionally, there are some editors that, there's some formatters that don't just align things on tab stops, whether by tabs or spaces. So, for example, you might want to line up the inside of a comment, and the inside of a comment might not have been on a tab stop. So you just have to add extra spaces that don't correspond to a tab stop at all.
Okay, I understand. But all of these things assume monospaced fonts. Without monospaced fonts, everybody is toast. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right. And is that a good assumption in the world today?
It is.
I absolutely do not want to deal with anything.
No. I'm asking a different question.
It is a good assumption in the world today, yes.
Okay. All right. Fine. It's interesting how that's evolved. Okay. So then one of the questions is, what's the heuristic, given that what you see, so what you've got is a bunch of lines that have random sequences of tabs and spaces. You could probably heuristically deduce where the tab stops, where the person thought the tab stops were, by looking at the correspondence between spaces and tabs on similar lines.
Yeah.
Right? So, but the overarching thing, so we don't even know whether what we think it looks like is what it actually looked like, because the tabs, what determines, so the tab stops are typically every 4 characters, is that correct? but they are tab stops, as in they go like an old typewriter to that position, right?
So that even that I'm going to say is, 4 is more common than anything else, but it's difficult to say anything universal here.
But I mean, is it a snap grid, or is it's not just you put in four spaces? It snaps to a granularity for.
Well, I mean, anything it just, there could be a setting in your editor to control that.
Yes. If you're in an editor where tabs are spaces, then pressing a tab takes you to the next multiple of 4. That is your question.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yes,
okay?
That is what happens.
Okay, so first point, it is almost certainly deducible. If there is a single parameter, let's call it, we could call it something very scientific, like tau. The tab stop, the tab stop parameter, okay? It is very likely we can deduce what tau is from looking at a file. Let's assume that we know the value of tau. Or worst case, the user could tell us, but let's assume we know it. Then the question is, when did the user goof? Well, first of all, what canonicalization do we want to do on their? So for example, let's say that we know the value of tau and it's 4, okay? And we see certain lines that have, 7 spaces in a tab. Do we want to replace that by just 2 tabs? I think possibly yes. I think that's a civilized thing to do. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a bit worried though that trying to figure out the heuristics and applying them, based on context, maybe a lot of time spent on an ultimately losing game.
Okay, well, okay, fine. But
whereas the other possibility that I would pose is, making it easy for users to configure whatever they want.
Fine. Let's do this. Let's put in the parameter tau as a user configurable thing.
Yep.
And let's and let's later on figure out whether we can deduce tau, machine learningly. Okay, I predict that we will be able to, but we don't need to cross that bridge. We can, generically set it to 4 or whatever, and then the user can reset it with some UX which we do not yet know. Like we could indicate tab stops or something, and people could just move it. I don't know how. I'm not sure how. I'm sure editors have a way of specifying that. Okay, but that doesn't solve the problem of when was a line a goof, right? When was it meaningful versus when was it a goof? Okay, yeah. So for example, an example of something that might be a goof is something where, like I've done this, there's some beautifully tabbed thing, which I don't understand at all because I opened it in an editor that has different tab stops, no tab stops at all. I opened it in the front end. I opened it somewhere where all the stuff was crazy. And I want to add some lines. And I just start typing. And my lines go in on the left margin because, I press some tabs and it zooms off to wherever because it the tab stops were different.
Yeah.
Okay. So clearly in a case like that, where I just started typing a line, I think if I gave so one case is I gave no indentation. I think in that case, it is reasonable, unless there are lots of lines with no indentation around it, to assume that I meant to give indentation that corresponds to the ambient indentation, assuming that it is in a semantic group with that ambient indentation. If it's a separated comment or something, I might have wanted to outdent it. Is that making sense?
Yeah, the problem is ambient indentation sometimes is only maybe just the line above it or the line below it, and you don't actually have that much context.
So what? I mean, look, what I'm saying is, okay, look, you have 2 pieces of information. You know where it is semantically in the code, right? Okay, so semantically, this line that got added that had no indentation given to it should have auto-indented to something. Okay. Now the question is, if it is semantically the same thing, if it's a list, for example, and it broke, the list was broken, twice above it, and it went to a certain indent level when the list broke, and now we've got some elements added which were unindented. Okay. Then we know those elements being added are of the same semantic level as the other elements in the list.
Sure.
Therefore, it is reasonable to indent them the same as the other things on the list.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so that's one case. One case is it is at the same semantic level as the thing that began the preceding line or the next line. I would argue if it's at the if the user showed intent for indentation of something of the same semantic level nearby, then you know what the indentation should be if you believe that the indentation of the line you're looking at was in error. Right, so one question is, you've got 3 lines, they've all got different indentation, which one is right? Okay, that's another question. By the way, are there other people on this meeting who might who might have opinions? By the way, we have a couple of UX comments on the live stream here. One is somebody who always wanted cell drag and drop. Yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? Why did we never consider that, John? I think we were so put off drag and drop by some of the things that happened about a decade or 15 years ago with what was it? What is that crazy thing?
We did have selection drag and drop for a while.
Oh, that's right, and that was horrifying.
Yeah.
But we never had cell drag and drop.
It's a little unclear to me how you I would be concerned that it would be invoked when you were trying to do selection too often.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, look, selection drag and drop was disastrous. I mean, did they take that out of the mainline word processors now? I haven't been bitten by it in a while. It's either been taken out or it's harder to access.
Yeah, I don't remember if it's harder to access.
Does anybody know? Is Noah here? Does he know the answer to that? Anybody know? No? Okay.
It can, I mean, looking at Word under Windows, and it does work there.
Apparently, the Jupyter people have implemented cell drag and drop, which may or may not be an advertisement for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's probably worth looking at cell drag and drop again. Keyboard navigation up and down the cell hierarchy would be nice. Don't we have something along those lines?
We do have keyboard navigation, but what happens that's a bit unfortunate is that it's very easy to drop out of a cell selection into a cell insertion point. And then you can get back into cell insertion selection if you accidentally drop out from the keyboard, but a lot of people don't know how to do it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. When you've got into a cell insertion point, the question is, how do you get back?
Because if you just press up arrow, it's gonna do a text selection. Now, if you press shift up arrow, it will select the cell. But a lot of people don't know that.
I didn't know that. It's been like that for 30 years, and I still didn't know it.
Also, the other thing is that you might expect left and right arrow to push in and out in a cell group. That does not happen. Maybe it should.
I don't see why not. I mean, we've also got that navigation for, a mobile. We've got a separate set of cell navigation things. And it would be nice to have them correspond.
I think one of the reasons we never got around to doing this is control period or command period, does push out in cell groups. And we had always thought that we would get around to implementing the shift version of that, which would, dive back inward.
I didn't
that
even
just
know
hasn't
that command
happened
period went out in cell groups.
yet. Command
Again,
period goes out everywhere where it's possible to go out.
Yeah, I mean, I yes.
Aside from the notebook itself, the only thing that can stop a command period is an input field, because input fields are made to contain selections.
Yeah, here's another comment that's sort of interesting. Sanders saying he'd like cell brackets on the left. I believe that in version 1 we had the choice of cell brackets on the left or the right.
Cell brackets, well, if you have a right to left language, then cell brackets on the left are awesome. But the principal issue.
Do we have a setting to put them on the left?
No, the principal issue with cell brackets on the left is that it forces either variable left margins or lots of space on the left to line things up.
Yeah, that was why we took it out of version 1. Yeah. Yep. But I mean, there presumably is a way to do that by having, particularly if you have, if you have a fixed width channel there, and you, just like we can have invisible cell brackets now.
Well, I mean, if you're willing not to show all of the grouping, then to have the grouping get clipped in some form, then yes, that could be done.
Or moving to the, I mean, a scrolling, that's a little bit weird, scrolling within the grouping.
I don't think people would figure that out.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's come back though to the
but actually, one more thing on this comment though is sometimes hard to see where the code on the left aligns to the cell bracket. That's a problem we can fix by means other than moving the cell brackets to the left.
I know, we in the cloud,
hover effects and that sort of thing.
We should have a hover effect in the cell.
And we frequently talked about it. We just haven't done it. And I think actually a hover effect and a selection effect that
we should do that. I thought the cloud had done that at one point.
Well, the cloud had done a hover effect, but I think that both a hover effect and a selection effect are
honestly, I think those are important, and I think we should look at that. Okay, separate from this meeting, but that could be the most important thing that came out of this specific meeting. I agree that those should be prioritized.
Oh, let's not put that on Brenton. Brenton's stuff is really important. No.
Brenton's stuff is very important. Yeah. I agree. The specifics of quadruple blank are probably not the most important example of Brenton's stuff.
That comes up more often than you think.
Okay. Only show the grouping beyond a certain level until the cursor enters the bracket range. Well, yeah, but you can't. You could. I don't see how you do that. There just isn't space on the left to put additional brackets. Anyway, I mean, there's probably something that can be thought about brackets on the left. But I think I agree with you, John, that I think this thing about hover effect is the obvious thing to do, and we should do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's I disagree with the remedy, but I agree with the problem. The problem being that you want to see how things line up, and
yeah, right.
So yeah.
I mean, even just some effect that doesn't have to be highlighting the whole cell, but some effect as you enter the cell. Don't we have that in the cloud that highlights the cell bracket? It does. In the cloud, it does highlight something because it shows you the gear menu, right? When you're over that cell, it's showing you the cell gear menu.
Yeah, but that's I think too subtle.
I agree. But something like that, or some lines above and below the cell, or something like that, when you enter the zone of the cell. I don't think you want to change the background color of the cell because that makes a big mess for other purposes. Okay, but anyway, let's come back to the heuristics of tabs and spaces. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess it could be boiled down to the problem is simply knowing when, the user goofed the formatting.
Okay, so hold on. First question is, what actions can you take? Okay, so let's talk about some actions you could take. And I hope somebody is, okay, you could merge spaces and tabs. That's one action you can take. Maybe a good idea, maybe a bad idea. I don't know. Okay, you can decide the user was clueless and just indent for them.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is easy to, yes. Yeah.
Okay. You can decide the user was trying to tell one something by their indentation and then try and just add some consistency. Or you could say the user is brilliant and knows exactly what they want to do and I don't want to touch it.
Yes.
So the question is, okay, one question would be, can we effectively, I mean, this feels like one of these sort of typical machine learning things. Can we learn enough about the user, what the user's conventions are supposed to be, that we can extrapolate from them?
Well, I mean, one difficult sort of problem that comes up around that is, what if what I'm looking at isn't my code? And it's not obvious, if it's not my code, what I might want to do with it. I mean, maybe I'm working in maybe I'm working in somebody else's Git repo and I want to stick to their conventions. Or maybe I'm putting I'm putting this code in my own stuff and I want it in my style, not their style.
Yep. No, that is a good point. Okay, so look, to me, okay, so first question is, can we learn the parameters of somebody's style? Answer, probably yes. And probably not without that many examples, actually. So, and the style will be basically, I mean, we need to parameterize the style, like how much indenting, where do they indent, what is their propensity to line break, those kinds of things. Assume there are a dozen parameters that characterize somebody's style. Yeah. Assume we could learn them. Okay, from a piece of code, from code that they have. Assume that we could fill in those parameters from a piece of code where we say, well, you've mostly followed your own conventions, but you've made a few, things that don't follow your conventions. We're going to ignore those somehow. Okay.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know what the UX of this is going to look like, but I kind of think that there may be, I mean, okay, so here's a crazy idea for you. Assume that we could make kind of a mini-map type picture of code where we have sort of a standardized piece of code and we show what it would look like in various conventions. Okay?
Yep.
And assume that what we do is we could deduce from a user's sampled the code. I mean, somebody could do this for themselves. They could run a piece of code that says, take these examples of mine and make my personal mini-map of what my indentation style is and so on. And then that becomes essentially a tile, a button that they could press along with others. So in other words, imagine that, because I think it's impossible to describe. It's ridiculous. Okay, airiness may be one parameter, but even that, it may be that the better thing to do is to show them like a visual gallery of, code appearances, including maybe one that they've custom. It's like a custom font that you made for yourself or something. I've tried to do that for myself multiple times over the years. I've never found one that actually works properly from handwriting, especially as my handwriting is getting worse and worse, but that's a separate issue. No, but more seriously, what do people think of that idea of kind of a visual gallery of indentation of formatting styles that you could pick from, just to know what the target is?
So other systems do have a way. I know Eclipse has something. Lots of other editors have this kind of system for displaying what you have the list of checkboxes or setters, whatever the parameters are, and as you're changing them, it updates this canonical piece of code to show you what it's doing.
Okay, fine. Well, so this is a better version of that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if people know what they want, then
okay. Listen, setting a bunch of checkboxes is a poor person's way of saying, this is code I like. Set the parameters like this. Right? If we can do that, it's better than having a bunch of checkboxes. I wonder what fraction of the time maybe people set those checkboxes. I have no idea. But, obviously, if we have a set of parameters, people can set the parameters. We don't necessarily have to provide them a big UX. We could just have a language level thing that sets it. Somebody could build a UX if they really want to. But I mean, but the whole point here is that there is a concept that there is a target, right? There's a target of what you want the code roughly to look like from a distance, so to speak. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's not obvious. That's not obvious. I mean, John's point is obviously correct, that you don't know whether it's your code or somebody else's code. And by default, it might be set to be, the tile that is deduced from your own code, or we might have a default that we can all argue about. Okay, but then the question is, given a particular thing that does not follow the target, what do you do about it? Right? That's the question.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, so was it a meaningful deviation or was it a mistake? Now,
Yes,
obviously, we could provide UX. What's that?
That is the question, yeah.
Okay, so we could obviously provide UX for that. We could have something which brings in some kind of dotted line thing and, a notifier that says, change the indentation ? And then one of the selectors could be, change all the indentations. Imagine that the page came up with a bunch of dotted lines indicating where the indentations would move, right, to reach your target.
Sure.
Okay? And imagine that you could, for each one, you could click on it to say whether you want to move that indentation. And if what you see on the page is everything's hunky-dory except for these couple of lines that look goofed up, then you go and click those. Or you might just, as soon as you see two of them, you might just say, fix them all because they're obviously correct.
Yeah.
Or you might say, the whole thing's goofed up, I just want to fix all of them.
Yeah.
People's thoughts about somebody's suggesting we define a standard indentation style. Obviously, what our auto formatter does will be our standard indentation style. But unfortunately, depending on what you're doing, between small pieces of code, larger pieces of code, there is no uniform choice.
Well, I have long suggested that we're in a position to say, you can do what you want, but if you want to hear our recommendation, this is our
I know,
one
but
true recommendation.
John, we went over this last time. Okay,
Yeah.
There are cases in which you're doing interactive work where you want to fill the line. There are cases where you're writing, systematic structured code where you want the thing to be many lines. Both are useful. Those two, among other endpoints, you can't distinguish between on the basis of they're both valid things to do.
I'm not conceding the points, but I'm not gonna argue about it either. It's
Yeah, well, I think we should assume that that's the case.
I'm not surprised to lose this argument. That doesn't mean that I agree with those.
Fine. Well, okay, but then you should show what you think the ideal indentation is for all these different cases. I mean, we've got a bunch of test samples.
Oh, and that's a bunch of work, though.
I know, but I think you're going to discover, because I've thought about this over the course of many years, that I don't think there is a uniform answer. I think it depends on the use case. And it depends on whether the code is steadily growing, and then there's a point at which you want to flip over, and so on. I think it's not so obvious. But in any case, okay, we're running out of time here, and I want to make sure, yes?
Oh, no, just as if we were talking about standardizing on what the notebook formatter does, one question that I did have, I'll type. So like with a new line, here, all that's added here is an indenting new line character. And it's a question in my mind, what this, obviously I can't select it, but the space that's to the left of the two, what that is, because that's not easily seen, just by looking at the boxes. And so
what do you
don't know.
You want to know when you're putting this into plain text, you want to know what to put there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So we
Obviously.
already do that. I mean, if you copy as input text, that's a plain text version of that. Which is a copy as input text is the one that's guaranteed to be semantically equivalent. Plain text is not guaranteed to be semantically equivalent.
no, just say copy as input text, please. Okay, that's your answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the front end is capable of producing that for you.
Okay, I just want to come back to one last time the question of the heuristics for when was the deviation from the target meaningful versus a mistake, and how you tell that. Okay, I don't know the answer to that. But I think that's the question that we should be. I think with some samples of code, I think I could figure out something reasonable. I think it will depend on, I mean, if you, it's like with handwriting, if you see if you just see the output, then it's much harder to tell what's going on than if you see the strokes that gave the handwriting. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Right. So in this case, if you see a person hitting these spaces and new lines and tabs and so on, which is again another degree of freedom we haven't discussed. If you have that data as well, then there's more that you can say, I think.
I mean, that's a big if, but yes.
No. Stop saying that. I mean, look, if they are typing this in our program editor, we have that information.
Do we?
Well, we saw the keystrokes. We may not be collecting it right now, but we certainly could. Right? If they typed it in some completely other IDE, we obviously don't have that information. And if we are providing our indenting rules to other IDEs, which is another thing we should be thinking about, and then, well, I guess we're just going to give them a piece of code that basically will just format according to our methods, that they can run IDE code in an IDE through. It's probably unrealistic to do anything other than that.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, I gotta go. I really look forward to seeing the red squiggly lines and some actual new line-based airiness stuff, and hope that will be soon.
Oh, and let me just say really quickly that somebody was, who was it? I missed it in my chat, but somebody was asking about automatic insertion of brackets and such. And I looked it up just so I could say for them what to watch. Episode 296 of Live CEOing is where we discussed a bunch of that.
Right, and hopefully
and there may yet be future discussions, but that's more relevant to that sort of question.
Yes, and we hope to have really good solution to that. All right, and we didn't let Timothy or any of these folks say a word here, but next time. All right, good stuff. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you all soon.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.